Hi, my name's Natalie. While my sister popped champagne to celebrate a $700 million inheritance, I was holding our dying mother's hand. She left Eleanor everything: the house, the vineyard, even the headline. All I got was an old flip phone. No letter, no explanation, just that. But when I turned it on, I didn't find closure. I found her voice, and what she said could bury more than just my sister. It could bring down names that never wanted to be spoken. My heart raced as the truth unfolded before me. So I have to ask, what would you do if the last thing your mother ever gave you was the truth everyone else paid to silence? Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening and where from? Because this one, it's not just a story. It's a reckoning that still makes my hands tremble when I think about it. Napa was glowing that evening. The hills shimmered with that kind of golden light only late spring can offer, and the Delmore estate sat like a crown in the middle of it. Music floated out over the vineyard. Soft jazz. Expensive camera flashes lit up the entrance as guests in custom designer silks and European satins stepped from black town cars, laughing too loudly, sipping Dom Perignon before they even reached the marble steps. And Eleanor, well, Eleanor stood in the middle of it all like she owned the valley and everyone in it. She wore gold, not just any gold. A dress woven with 24-carat gold thread that caught every ray of light, custom-tailored to her perfect figure. Her hair was swept up into something regal that must have taken hours. Her Christian Louboutin clicked like punctuation marks across the Italian flagstone. Every eye was on her as she lifted her crystal flute and announced, "To legacy, mine at last. To the future, my future." Not once did she mention our mother. While Eleanor toasted herself, I sat 20 minutes away on the edge of a hospice bed, my back aching from sitting in the same position for hours. Mom's forehead was hot against my palm, but not feverish, just the last flicker of a fire burning out. I felt the heat radiating from her skin as I dabbed gently with a warm cloth, her breathing a slow, painful push against the silence that made my chest tighten with each labored breath she took. "Natalie," Hannah the nurse whispered as she passed behind me, her hand briefly touching my shoulder with gentle concern. "You don't have to stay here every hour." I know, but I stayed, my eyes burning from lack of sleep. Even when Mum could barely speak, even when she didn't remember if I was her daughter or just another nurse, something in her eyes still knew I wouldn't leave. Not like Eleanor had. The betrayal still stung like salt in an open wound. The gala invitation sat crumpled in my purse, the gold foil lettering now dull and creased. I hadn't planned to go, but guilt is a strange thing. It wears on you like a weighted blanket, especially when you're the only one left sitting in a quiet room while the rest of the world celebrates a lie that makes your stomach turn. I left the hospice house just after sundown, my eyes adjusting to the darkness as I pulled into the Delmore driveway under a canopy of twinkling string lights and camera flashes that made me squint. I didn't come to cause trouble, my heart pounding with anxiety. I came because I thought maybe they'd let me say something. Something about Mom, something small, something true. But the moment Eleanor saw me, her picture-perfect smile dropped like the final curtain at a theatre. "You shouldn't be here," she said, barely moving her lips, her voice cold as ice. "Not tonight. I just wanted to speak for Mom." "1 minute, that's all," I pleaded, feeling small in my department store dress. Eleanor leaned in close, her Chanel perfume suffocating me, her voice coated in sugar, words sharpened like knives. "Mom left you the only thing you ever deserved: silence." She turned and walked away without another glance, leaving me standing there with a hole in my chest. I stood there, stunned, feeling the blood drain from my face. The room hadn't heard her, but it didn't matter. The message stuck like a stain I couldn't wash out. Still, I moved toward the microphone, my legs trembling with each step. The MC hesitated, eyes darting to Eleanor. She didn't hesitate. 2 security men in black suits appeared from nowhere and flanked me like I was some kind of threat. I barely got a word out before one of them placed a hand too firm on my shoulder, his fingers digging into my skin as he whispered, "Mom, you're disrupting the program." "I'm her daughter," I said louder than I meant to, my voice cracking with emotion. "Her daughter?" he repeated with obvious skepticism. "Not tonight, you're not," Eleanor said without even looking back, her voice carrying across the room like a death sentence. They walked me out past tables of guests with furrowed brows and murmured guesses that burned my ears. One woman I vaguely recognized from Mom's book club looked at me like I was a story she almost remembered. One she hadn't finished, her eyes filled with pity that made me want to scream. The air outside was colder than I expected. My breath came out in clouds that disappeared into the darkness. The silence hit harder than any of Eleanor's words, wrapping around me like an unwelcome embrace. Back home, Hannah was just finishing up, her medical bag packed and ready to go. She slipped in and out, she said softly, nodding toward Mom's room, her eyes filled with compassion. Didn't ask for anyone but you. Oh, and she left this, told me to give it to you if anything changed. She handed me a plain white box about the size of a paperback. My name was written across the top in Mom's shaky handwriting, each letter formed with obvious effort. Inside, a scratched-up flip phone, ancient-looking. One of those plastic ones with a rubbery keypad and screen no bigger than a matchbox. On top of it, a yellow post-it note with Mom's delicate handwriting. She said, "It's for your eyes only." I almost laughed, the sound catching in my throat. After all that, after being erased from the will, from the party, from my mother's own legacy, I got a burner phone that looked like it belonged in a museum. I tossed it on the kitchen counter with a clatter and went to check on Mom. She was asleep, peaceful finally. The kind of sleep that doesn't need a clock anymore. I stayed with her, holding her frail hand in mine. Hours passed like molasses. Sometime after midnight, exhaustion weighing on my shoulders, I wandered back into the kitchen and picked up the phone out of habit or curiosity or something I couldn't explain. It was dead, of course. I found an old charger in Mom's desk drawer and plugged it in, then went to make tea, the kettle's whistle cutting through the silence. I didn't expect anything, but then a soft chime echoed across the kitchen, making me jump. The screen blinked to life. A blue folder icon appeared with one label, "Only Daughter." My heart stopped, and then the screen lit again. One line of text appeared beneath the folder that made my blood run cold. "They've already erased you." The screen blinked again. "Only Daughter." I tapped it with a shaky thumb. More from instinct than plan, my pulse pounding in my ears. The folder flickered, then paused. A small grey box popped up. "Enter password." My stomach tightened into a knot. I tried her birthday, then mine, then combinations, my fingers trembling over the tiny keypad. Our home address, Hannah's name, the date Dad passed. Nothing worked. Each failed attempt making my frustration grow. I tried once more. Mom's old favourite, dandelion. She always said it looked like hope in disguise. A memory that brought tears to my eyes. Still wrong. I sat back, the phone warming in my hand like a living thing. Then a sound cracked through the speaker, grainy, barely audible. I almost dropped it, my heart leaping to my throat. It was her voice. Faint, breathy, like she'd recorded it from the edge of something final. "Don't let them sign it. It's not final." Not yet. And then silence, deafening in its completeness. I pressed replay with frantic fingers, but the message wouldn't come up again. Gone. Just like her, leaving only questions and a hollow feeling in my chest. I stayed on the couch the rest of the night, the phone clutched in my hand, its weight both comforting and terrifying. Sleep came in fits, my mind running laps around what I just heard, my heart racing with every new thought. Sign what? What wasn't final? The questions burned in my mind like fire. The sky outside was still dusky grey when the doorbell rang, startling me from my half-sleep. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not men in expensive slacks and tailored jackets that probably cost more than my rent. 2 men stood at the door, one thin with sharp features, one broad with a forced smile. Both carried leather briefcases and polite smiles that didn't reach their calculating eyes. "Ms. Delmore?" Jonathan, the thinner one, asked, holding a manila envelope like it was a peace offering. "We're from Belmont and Hartley, representing your sister. May we come in?" His voice was smooth as oil. I didn't answer right away, just stepped aside, feeling cornered in my own home. We sat at the kitchen table, the smell of their expensive cologne mixing with my day-old coffee. I noticed how quickly they laid everything out. Their movements practiced and precise, documents already open, pens ready like weapons. "These are standard," Marcus, the broader man, explained, his voice too loud for the quiet kitchen. "Just a formal release of claims. Given the will was clear and Ms. Eleanor is the sole beneficiary. This simply avoids future complications." He smiled, showing too many teeth. "I haven't read the will," I said flatly, feeling the weight of their stares. "Of course," Jonathan nodded, his tone condescending. "But the terms are final. This is about closure. Closure. It was the same word Hannah used. It never felt more hollow, more meaningless. I skimmed the first few pages, my legal background helping me decode the dense text. The language was dense, legal, cold as ice. Then I paused, my heart skipping a beat at one line printed in small italics. The revised estate plan dated April 17th is deemed void and unenforceable. Revised? I asked, my voice sharper than intended. What revision? The two exchanged a look too quick to miss, a flash of panic crossing their faces. Jonathan recovered first, smoothing his tie. It's an old version. Nothing actionable. His dismissive tone made my skin crawl. That's not what I asked, I said, looking directly into his eyes until he glanced away. Marcus cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. Your mother wasn't in her right mind when she made that change anyway. His words hung in the air like an accusation. I looked up sharply, anger flaring in my chest. You said made that change, so she did revise it. I felt a small victory as his face flushed. He hesitated, fingers drumming on the table. Well, there were drafts, conversations, nothing binding. The lie was transparent as glass. I pushed the papers back toward them, hearing them slide across the wood. I won't sign. My voice was steady despite the rage building inside me. They both chuckled, the sound grating on my ears. The kind of chuckle that wasn't friendly but threatening. You're making this harder than it needs to be, Jonathan said, already gathering his things, his movements jerky with irritation. This was meant to give you a clean exit. I didn't ask for a clean exit. I asked for the truth, I said, standing up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Before they could speak again, I stood, my whole body tense. We're done. The words came out stronger than I felt. They left with clipped goodbyes and muttered annoyance that they didn't bother to hide. And I locked the door behind them, my hands shaking as I turned the deadbolt. I didn't even sit down before my phone buzzed loudly against the counter. Eleanor. I let it ring once, twice, my heart hammering in my chest. Then I answered, pressing the phone to my ear. Her voice was syrup, sweet and dangerous as poison. Natalie, I heard the lawyer stopped by. I could picture her perfect smile as she spoke. They did, I replied, keeping my voice neutral despite my clenched fist. She sighed dramatically, the sound making me flinch. This doesn't have to get messy. Her tone was the same one she used when we were children, and she was telling me to stop crying. It's already messy, I said, feeling a strange calm settling over me. Then don't make it worse. She paused, the silence heavy with threat. You've always been the quiet one. Stay that way. It suits you. Each word dripped with condescension. I'm not 12 anymore, Eleanor, I said, surprising myself with my steadiness. No, but you're still not someone who knows when to walk away, she replied, her voice hardening. I didn't respond, letting her words hang in the air between us. Let it go, she said softly, the gentleness more frightening than anger. There's nothing in that phone worth ruining the family over. And then she hung up, leaving me standing in my kitchen, cold realization washing over me. She knew. She knew what Mom left me. The knowledge sent a chill down my spine. I went back to the couch and picked up the flip phone again, my fingers moving with renewed purpose as I scrolled through every menu, folder, setting. My heart nearly stopped when I saw it. A buried app, one I hadn't opened. Looked like a game icon, but when I tapped it, another folder popped up. Audio record, Daro 423, legal clause, MP4. I didn't breathe. My lungs frozen. The icon pulsed once more, seeming to beat like a heart. I hesitated, then tapped it, my finger trembling. A low hiss opened the audio. Static first, then breath that made the hairs on my arms stand up. If something happens to me, it was her voice again. My mother's. Clear and unmistakable. Check clause 17C. I changed it. I left something for you. Eleanor doesn't know. The words hit me like physical blows. I gripped the phone tighter, my pulse quickening, blood rushing in my ears. That tone, it wasn't frail. It was deliberate, focused. She knew what she was saying. Knew it might never reach me otherwise. I played it again and again, my skin tingling. Each time her words landed heavier, sinking deeper into my consciousness. Clause 17C. What did it mean? The question burned in my mind. I didn't sleep much that night, my body exhausted but my mind racing. Morning came without warning, the kind that seeps into the kitchen blinds while your mind's still sprinting through possibilities. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the bitter taste grounding me as I let the silence hang, and opened the phone once more, my purpose clear. A second pop-up appeared now that the audio had played, making my heart leap. Just coordinates. An address in town, Old Garden Bank, a place my mother hadn't visited in years, or so I thought. I threw on a jacket and left, adrenaline propelling me forward. Driving past the vineyard where Eleanor held that wretched gala just 2 nights ago made my jaw clench until it ached. She was likely still glowing in her new role as the Delmore matriarch, while I was chasing ghosts and whispers. The bank stood quietly on a side street, unassuming and almost invisible compared to the grand buildings downtown. No cameras, no marble floors, just glass doors that stuck a little when you pulled, the metal handle cool under my sweaty palm. I walked up to the teller, my heart in my throat, and gave her my mother's name. When she asked for ID and verification, my hands trembled as I slid the printed code from the phone across the desk. She disappeared into the back, her heels clicking on the tile floor. 10 minutes later, I was in a private room with a small metal drawer in front of me, my reflection distorted in its polished surface. Inside was a flash drive wrapped in a lavender handkerchief that still smelled faintly of my mother's Chanel No. 5, the scent bringing tears to my eyes. Beneath it, a sealed envelope with my name in her handwriting, each letter formed with care and purpose. I sat there a while before opening it, turning it over in my hands, afraid of what I might find. The letter began simply, "Natalie, I should have spoken louder. I should have protected you more." This was the only way I could leave something true. The words blurred as my eyes filled with tears. I didn't blink, didn't breathe, my chest tight with emotion. I just read it over and over, tears slipping silently onto my jeans, creating dark spots on the denim. This wasn't guilt. It wasn't even grief. It was the recognition I'd waited decades to feel. Like maybe I hadn't imagined how hard it had been. She had known all along. She had seen me, really seen me. I opened the flash drive at home, plugging it into the old laptop I kept for scanning records, my fingers clumsy with anticipation. A folder blinked open immediately. Contracts, handwritten notes, a scanned copy of a legal will revised dated 1 week after the version Eleanor presented at the gala. Clause 17C was highlighted in yellow, jumping out from the page. In the event that Natalie Delmore is excluded from all public acknowledgement or estate discussion. This clause restores her position as co-beneficiary. The words made my heart race. She'd tried to leave me something, a safeguard against Eleanor's manipulation. But no one ever mentioned this clause. Not Jonathan and Marcus, not Eleanor. It had been erased or buried deep enough no one would find it unless they knew where to look. And now I had it, clutched in my trembling hands. Still, I sat back, a strange heaviness pressing down on my chest. Something felt unfinished, incomplete, a heaviness pressed down like there was more I hadn't seen yet, a truth still waiting to be discovered. Sure enough, another file sat at the bottom of the flash drive. Diary week before Gala MP3. I clicked it, holding my breath. Her voice came softer this time, spoken more like a confession than a message, intimate and raw. "I didn't want it this way," she whispered, the pain in her voice making my heart ache. But Eleanor was relentless. She came every day. She kept saying things like, "Don't you want to leave a legacy?" Or "Natalie wouldn't care anyway." She never does. Each word was a knife in my heart. There was a long pause before she continued, the sound of her labored breathing filling my quiet apartment. I signed the wrong version, then I changed it back. Walter helped. He said he'd make sure the right one was filed. But then things moved fast. Too fast. Her voice caught, revealing her fear. Her breathing grew shaky, making my own chest tighten in response. Natalie never wanted anything but the truth, so I left her that. The simple statement made tears stream down my face. The recording clicked off. I sat there frozen, her words echoing in my mind, my body numb with shock. Walter M. That name hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't a stranger. He was Eleanor's financial consultant for years. Quiet, unassuming, the kind of man who carried file folders and wore grey ties. My uncle, Mom's brother. My eyes drifted back to the screen, scanning for more clues. One final document sat unopened. It was the revised will. At the bottom, beneath my mother's faded signature, was another. Witness Walter M. The signature seemed to pulse on the screen, demanding my attention. I leaned forward, gripping the edge of the desk until my knuckles turned white. So, he knew. He had seen her sign it. He had stood right there in that room. And now he was working for Eleanor. The betrayal burned like acid in my stomach. I stared at the screen for a long moment, that signature haunting me like a whisper from a locked room calling me to action. Walter M. I hadn't seen his name in years, but I knew exactly who he was. My mother's older brother. My uncle. The man who always seemed to disappear into the background when the family conflicts began. Uncle Walter used to handle the estate books before Eleanor's rise to power. Quiet, reserved, always in the background during family gatherings, nursing the same glass of scotch for hours. He had a way of folding his hands like he was hiding something inside them, his fingers interlaced so tightly they turned white at the knuckles. I used to think it was just shyness or discomfort. No, I wasn't so sure. Now I saw it as guilt. By early afternoon, I was pulling into the long gravel drive of his small cottage off Dry Creek Road, stones crunching beneath my tyres. It hadn't changed a bit in the 15 years since I'd last visited. Rose bushes grown wild and untamed, a wind chime too tangled to sing anymore, and a front door that's still stuck halfway open, the blue paint peeling at the edges. I knocked once, then again, the sound echoing in the quiet countryside. He opened it slower than I remembered, his movements cautious and deliberate. "Natalie," he said, blinking like I was someone he'd left in a dream years ago. His eyes widening with recognition and something else. "Fear? I need to talk to you," I said, holding up my phone, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's about Mom." He didn't invite me in, but he stepped aside, his shoulders slumping in resignation. That was all the permission I needed. His house smelled like old paper and menthol balm, familiar and strange at the same time. I sat at the dining table, cluttered with unopened mail and crossword books filled with his neat handwriting. He sat across from me, hands folded just like always, his knuckles white with tension. I opened the file on the screen and turned it toward him, the screen glowing between us like an accusation. "That's your signature," I said, watching his face carefully. He didn't deny it, his eyes fixed on the document. "She asked me to witness it," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "She said it was important." His hands trembled slightly. "And was it?" I pressed, leaning forward. He nodded slowly, a strand of grey hair falling across his forehead. "She said Eleanor was pushing her, that the lawyers had started showing up before she could decide clearly. She wanted a backup, something that couldn't be touched. She trusted you." The words hung between us, heavy with implication. "I know." His voice cracked a little, revealing the burden he'd been carrying. "And yet you didn't say a word when they read the other will?" I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. He rubbed his temple, his fingers pressing hard enough to leave red marks. "You think I didn't want to?" "I was going to." But then Eleanor's team showed up. A man named Darryl from the firm said it was better for everyone if we let things go. That your mother had changed her mind again. His voice was pleading for understanding. "Did she?" I asked, my heart pounding as I waited for his answer. He looked down at his hands, unable to meet my eyes. "No, I don't think so." The admission hung in the air between us. Silence stretched across the table like a judgment. He stood suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor, and went to the hallway, his footsteps heavy. He returned with a manila folder yellowed with age. Inside, a copy of the envelope my mother had used, dated, sealed, addressed to her own name and marked personal in red ink. He laid it in front of me like an offering. "I kept it just in case," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Because you knew it wasn't right," I said, running my fingers over the envelope, feeling the texture of the paper. He didn't respond, his silence an admission of guilt. I leaned back, my stomach felt knotted and twisted like I was about to be sick. The betrayal was almost too much to bear. "You were there, Walter. You watched her sign it, and when they erased her voice, you stayed silent." Each word was an accusation. He closed his eyes, pain etched on his face. "I thought they'd honor her in other ways. I didn't think they'd cut you out completely." His voice was pleading. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "You didn't think Eleanor would cut me out? She's been doing that since I was 12. Since she realized I was the one Mom trusted with her secrets." "She's your sister," he said weakly. "No, she's not. Not in anything that matters." The words came out like bullets. Walter looked older than I remembered. Greyer, sunken in a way that suggested more than age. Guilt, maybe, or the weight of too many secrets. "I'll testify," he said at last, the words seeming to cost him greatly. "If this goes to court, I'll tell them she signed it and that I was there." His hands shook as he spoke. "Why now?" I asked, searching his face. "Because I found the document, or because you finally can't sleep?" The accusation hung between us. He looked at me then, eyes full of something I couldn't read, pain and regret swimming in their depths. "Because you asked and because I can't lie anymore." The simple honesty of his answer took me by surprise. There wasn't forgiveness in my silence, but maybe something close to acknowledgement of his courage now. As I stood to leave, my legs unsteady, he followed me to the door, his movements slow and deliberate. "One condition," he said, his voice low and urgent. If this goes public, keep my name out of it. I don't need people digging. His eyes were pleading. You don't want people to know you stayed quiet, I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. He winced as if I'd struck him. Just protect my family. My wife doesn't know any of this, and she's sick. The stress could kill her. His concern seemed genuine. I nodded once, my anger softening slightly. If you stand by what you just said, I'll protect what you care about. The promise felt heavy on my lips. I left without another word, the door closing softly behind me. The wind outside was sharper now, cutting through my jacket. Or maybe I just noticed it more. My senses heightened by what I'd learned. Back home, I tossed my keys onto the side table with a clatter and was halfway through unzipping my jacket when I noticed the cream-coloured envelope on the floor. It had been slid under the door while I was gone. No stamp, no return address. Just my name typed in a font that screamed legal document. I opened it, the paper slicing my finger slightly. Inside was a single page on expensive letterhead. Cease and desist. You are hereby instructed to refrain from all defamatory inquiries or insinuations concerning the estate of Victoria, Delmore, or the financial inheritance of Eleanor Delmore. It was signed by Eleanor's attorneys, the same ones who had stood smiling behind her at the gala raising glasses like they hadn't just buried someone alive. So that's how she wanted to play it. The realization made my blood boil. I folded the letter, placed it on the counter beside the sink, and poured myself a glass of water with shaking hands. I didn't drink it. I just stood there staring into the glass, the water reflecting the kitchen light, like I could see the next step waiting if I looked hard enough. The envelope was plain but expensive, the kind that costs more than it should. No return address, just my name typed neatly in the center like someone wanted it to feel sterile, impersonal, like a medical diagnosis rather than a threat. But as soon as I slid the paper out and read the words, cease and desist, my throat tightened until I could barely breathe. It wasn't just a warning. It was a message that said, you're alone in this and we're watching your every move. I reread it twice, standing in the entryway with my shoes still on, bag dangling off one shoulder, its weight suddenly noticeable. Each line was legal jargon, laced with veiled threats, accusations of defamation, unsubstantiated inquiries, and a subtle reminder that Eleanor had the best lawyers in Napa County, maybe in the whole damn state. Each word was designed to make me feel small and powerless. I moved to the kitchen and laid the paper on the counter next to the sink, my movements mechanical. My tea from that morning had gone cold in its mug. I poured it out without thinking, watching the brown liquid circle the drain. The silence of the apartment suddenly felt louder than anything, pressing against my eardrums. Was I going too far? Had I spun a story in my head that wasn't really there? I thought of Walter, of how he looked when he handed me that envelope, his eyes full of guilt and relief, as if he'd been waiting years for someone to ask the right question. But now, I wondered if I had dragged him into something that would swallow us both whole. That night, I barely slept, tossing and turning in sheets that felt too hot, then too cold. I kept seeing my mother's face in that hospital bed, not in pain, but in absence, like something vital had already slipped from her days before her last breath. I had stayed beside her, held her hand until it was ice cold, whispered prayers she couldn't hear. I thought presence meant something, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was action that mattered, not just being there. At dawn, my phone buzzed loudly on the nightstand, startling me from my fitful sleep. A text. Eleanor. Why are you doing this? You think this will bring her back? The words glowed accusingly in the dim morning light. I didn't respond, anger and determination flowing through me. I deleted the message, then the entire thread, erasing her digital presence from my phone. Then before I could talk myself out of it, I deleted the app I'd used to pull the files from Mum's phone. Just like that, gone with a single touch like it had never existed. The phone sat on the coffee table, dark and lifeless in the morning light. I stared at it for 10 full minutes, my mind racing with doubts. Before reaching for it, I stopped short. My hand hovered in midair, trembling slightly. I stood up instead, pacing the worn carpet. By mid-morning, I was digging through drawers with frantic energy, pulling out an old storage bin and tossing everything into it. Flash drives, notes, printouts, even Mum's flip phone that now felt like it was burning my fingers. If I kept pushing this, Eleanor would bury me legally with her army of lawyers. Emotionally, she already had, leaving me raw and exposed. I stayed, I whispered aloud, pacing the living room with no one to hear me, my voice breaking. That should have mattered. The words hung in the empty apartment. My fingers trembled as I reached for the lid to the box, tears blurring my vision. I was ready to close it. Ready to let the whole damn thing go. Surrender to the easier path. Then something impossible happened. The phone screen blinked to life. It was off. I'd powered it down myself. And yet now it pulsed with a blue light, like it had been waiting for this exact moment of weakness. I lifted it with trembling hands, staring at it in disbelief. The screen flickered once more, casting a ghostly light on my face. Backup folder detected. A single file loaded in. Final mom voice of V. The file name made my heart skip a beat. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the play button, fear and hope warring inside me. Then I tapped play, holding my breath. Her voice came through, raspy but unmistakably hers, sending chills down my spine. Natalie, if you've come this far, I need you to know. They made me sign it while I was medicated. I wasn't in my right mind. They said it was easier that way. The words hit me like physical blows. I felt the breath leave my body in a rush, my lungs emptying completely. She paused on the recording, maybe catching her own exhaustion, the sound of her labored breathing filling my silent apartment. Then she went on slower, each word deliberate and clear. I never wanted it to end this way. Not with lawyers. Not with Eleanor smiling like she'd won something. I tried. God knows I tried to make things fair. But I was tired and they knew it. The pain in her voice was unbearable. Silence stretched out, making me lean closer to the speaker. Then her voice cracked one last time, the sound breaking my heart. If anyone can carry truth quietly, it's you. That was it. The recording stopped. The screen went black again, returning to darkness. But I stayed still, not crying, not shaking, just sitting on the floor where my legs had given out. Because it was all finally painfully clear in a way that made my whole body ache. She'd seen it happening. She hadn't fought loud. She'd fought in whispers, in hidden folders, and handwritten letters left like breadcrumbs. It wasn't cowardice. It was desperation, and she trusted me to finish it. The realization settled in my chest like a stone. I set the phone back down carefully, treating it like the precious evidence it was. Then I reopened the backup folder, downloaded every file with renewed purpose. And before I could lose my nerve, I opened a blank email, typed in Walter's address with steady fingers, attached 3 audio files, and wrote just one sentence in the body of the message: if I'm the quiet one, let's see what happens when I speak. I hit send before I could change my mind. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even lie down, my body too wired with adrenaline. Instead, I watched the sun climb slowly across the living room wall, painting it gold, then white. Hour by hour as the message sat there in my sent folder, untouched. No reply, not yet. The waiting was its own kind of torture. By 900 AM, I had called the little Italian place in town. My mother's favourite, the one with the lace curtains and the framed photo of her and the owner from years ago, their smiles genuine and warm. I made a reservation for 2, my voice steadier than I expected. Quiet corner table, please. Not near the windows. The one by the fireplace, if possible. The same table where Mum and I had celebrated my law school acceptance. By 9:10, I'd sent Eleanor a message, keeping it simple and direct. Natalie, dinner tonight. Just you and me. No lawyers, no drama, just sisters. The words just sisters felt foreign as I typed them. She didn't reply right away, making me check my phone obsessively. But by noon, 3 dots danced on my screen, then vanished. Then reappeared, her hesitation visible even through technology. Eleanor 6:30, don't make it messy. The warning was clear. I could almost hear her tone, clipped, poised, like she was doing me a favor just by showing up, like I should be grateful for her presence. But I wasn't looking for her favor or her approval. I was looking for something else entirely. I was looking for justice. That evening, I arrived early, the smell of garlic and fresh bread filling the restaurant. The hostess knew my name, smiled softly as she led me to the back table near the stone fireplace, where flames danced and crackled. I asked for a pot of chamomile tea, the familiar ritual calming my nerves. It was the same spot Mom always chose when she came in alone, saying it made her feel protected. When Eleanor walked in 10 minutes later, heads turned throughout the restaurant, not out of curiosity but admiration and recognition. She still had that polished, untouchable quality that made people stare. Hair in soft waves that looked effortless but probably cost hundreds, pearl earrings that caught the light, the kind of confidence that made waiters apologize just for asking questions. She looked like she owned the place and everyone in it. She sat down without a word, placed her Hermes clutch on the table like it deserved its own seat, and studied me for a beat, her eyes cold and calculating. "You're early," she said, unfolding her napkin with practiced grace. "I've been ready for this conversation for years," I said, keeping my voice even despite my racing heart. We ordered from the leather-bound menus. She chose sea bass, expensive and imported. I went with soup and salad, simple and familiar. We barely spoke through appetizers, the silence heavy between us. The wine arrived in crystal glasses. She drank deeply. I didn't touch mine. I wanted a clear head for what was coming. Dessert came, and with it my moment. I reached into my coat pocket, feeling the small object inside. I set a flash drive on the white tablecloth between us. It was small, black, unmarked, harmless at first glance. But she froze the second it landed, her spoon halting halfway to her mouth. "That's what Mom left me," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Her voice, her words. You might want to hear what she said about you and your team of lawyers." The threat was implicit. Eleanor didn't move for a long second, her face a perfect mask. Then she laughed, not loudly, but the kind of sharp, dismissive laugh you give someone you think is beneath you. "You're bluffing," she said, fingers tightening around her fork until her knuckles turned white. "No," I said calmly, meeting her gaze without flinching. "I'm remembering, and I'm done forgetting. I'm done being invisible." She picked up the flash drive like it was contaminated, holding it between two manicured fingers. "You think this changes anything?" Her voice was deadly quiet. "It does. Clause 17C is still valid. You knew that, didn't you?" I watched as the color drained from her face. Her face twitched. Just a flicker, but it was there, a crack in her perfect facade. "You don't have the guts to take this public," she said low, leaning forward, her perfume overwhelming. "You never did." I looked her in the eye, steady and unflinching for the first time in our lives. "That's what you counted on, didn't you? That I'd stay quiet. That I'd do what I've always done. Sit in the back row, not cause a scene, shrink myself to make you comfortable." Eleanor smiled slow and icy, but it didn't reach her eyes. And yet here we are, having this pathetic confrontation. Neither of us touched the tiramisu that sat between us, melting slowly. She left before I did, heels sharp and angry against the tile floor. No goodbye, no glance back. Just the lingering scent of her perfume and the weight of unfinished business. Later that night, I sat on my living room couch, heart steady but heavy with purpose. Laptop open in front of me, casting a blue glow on my face. I didn't need a podium or a press conference. I needed a post that would speak the truth. I logged into the memorial page we'd created after Mom passed, the cursor blinking in the empty field. Eleanor had forgotten all about it, too busy with her new wealth. I was sure it had only a few photos, a few generic tributes, nothing that would threaten her narrative. I clicked new post, my fingers steady on the keyboard. Title, she always said the quiet ones remember everything. Body, the truth is never loud, but it's permanent. The words felt right, powerful in their simplicity. I added a single link to an anonymous drive with carefully redacted files. Audio files with timestamps, signatures that couldn't be denied. Legal memos that revealed the manipulation. Not all of them, just enough to crack open the door to the truth. I hit post, watching the screen update. Then I shut the laptop and stared at the wall until morning. A strange peace settling over me. The call came at 7:02, the ringtone jarring in the quiet apartment. No caller ID, but I knew the voice before she even said hello, my body tensing at the sound. "You crossed a line," Eleanor said, her voice cool and sharp as a blade. "Don't think you'll like what happens next." The threat hung in the air between us. The line went dead with a click, but her words stayed, echoing in my mind. "You crossed a line. Don't think you'll like what happens next." The warning sent a chill down my spine despite my resolve. I stood in my kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear. Long after the silence came, the plastic warm against my skin. Outside, birds were waking, their songs filtering through the window. Inside, something else was waking too, anger. Maybe, or something colder and more determined. I didn't check my emails until after I'd made coffee, the familiar ritual grounding me. It was still early, too early for normal correspondence. But the first thing I saw wasn't an ad or a coupon. It was a forwarded message from HR with the subject line, "Urgent concern regarding online activity." My stomach dropped as I opened it. Beneath it, a short sentence from my supervisor. "Let's meet at 11 privately." The formality of the message made my heart race. I scrolled down, anger building as I read. Someone had sent a collection of screenshots to my workplace. Old ones. Things from years back that I barely remembered. Notes from a conflict I had with a team member. Long resolved, complaints taken out of context. Comments twisted to make me look unstable and vindictive. Attached was a blog post from an anonymous source, clearly created overnight. Natalie Delmore, the forgotten sister with a dangerous imagination. The title alone made my blood boil. I almost laughed, but the photos they'd used weren't stock. They were real, personal. One of them was from my mother's funeral. My eyes swollen from crying, face pale with grief. I wore no makeup, had barely managed to brush my hair. The caption read, "Unstable? Sources say yes." The violation made me physically sick. By 10:30, I was sitting in my manager's office, the familiar space now feeling hostile. She looked uncomfortable, shifting papers on her desk. She always did when things got personal, avoiding eye contact. "Natalie," she started, clasping her hands, her wedding ring clicking against her desk. "We've received a few communications, unverified but concerning enough that we need to address them." Her voice was gentle but firm. I let her speak, watching her face as she fumbled through phrases like company image and external behavior standards and temporary leave of absence. I nodded, stood, my legs surprisingly steady. "I understand," I said, my voice calm despite the storm inside. "You'll want me to take a leave?" I was already removing my badge. She didn't answer directly, but her sigh and downcast eyes were enough. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just walked out, head held high, feeling strangely free despite everything. My car sat in the same parking spot it had for 5 years under the same brittle maple tree that was just starting to bud. But something had shifted fundamentally. Not in the car or the tree, but in me. I was no longer the person who would stay quiet to keep peace. By the time I reached home, I already knew Eleanor's team had planned this character assassination. The headlines were too clean, too coordinated, appearing simultaneously across different platforms. But as I closed the door behind me, a different sound filled the space, stopping me in my tracks. My mother's voice, faint but clear, calm and determined, echoed from the phone still charging on the counter. I had hit play without realizing it, the screen lighting up as I passed. "They'll try to make you feel small," she said, her voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. "But you're not. You never were." The words wrapped around me like an embrace. She had recorded it just weeks before she passed, when she must have known what was coming. Her voice wasn't strong physically, but it was steady with conviction. I sat on the floor with the phone clutched in my hands, tears streaming down my face. This wasn't sadness anymore. It was grief shaped into something sharp and purposeful, a weapon I could wield. Around 3, I opened my contacts, scrolling down to a name I hadn't touched in years. Rebecca Denton. She used to write for the Chronicle, investigative reporter with a reputation for fearlessness. Sharp as nails and twice as fast with a story. She also happened to be one of my mother's oldest friends, someone who knew the family before the money came. I sent a single text, my fingers steady. "I have something you need to hear. It's real and it's bigger than me." The message felt inadequate for what I was about to share. She replied within 20 minutes, faster than I expected. "Then let's talk tonight. Some stories deserve more than text messages." The response gave me hope. We met at a bookstore cafe on the edge of town, away from the usual social circles. One of those places where no one asks questions, and the jazz is always a little too loud for eavesdropping. Rebecca looked older than I remembered, her hair now silver instead of brown, but her eyes just as alert and penetrating as they assessed me. I slid the flash drive across the table without ceremony. "This is everything," I said, my voice low but clear. "Every recording, every document, every lie." She plugged it into her laptop without hesitation. No small talk, no pleasantries. This wasn't social, this was business. Her brows knit together as she listened through her earbuds, her expression growing darker with each file. She didn't speak until the third clip played, the one where Mom mentioned names, lawyers, trustees, and 2 familiar senators from the donor registry who had helped pressure her. Rebecca leaned back slowly, removing her earbuds, her face grave. "You realize this doesn't just take down your sister," she said, her voice hushed despite the music. "It could ruin 5 people in Washington. People with real power and connections." Her eyes searched mine for hesitation. I looked at her directly, feeling a calm certainty settle over me. "Then maybe it's time they all fall together." The words came easily, without doubt. I didn't flinch when Rebecca said it. I just looked at her. really looked beyond her warning to the journalism hunger beneath. Her eyes weren't challenging me. They were warning me, giving me one last chance to back out. This doesn't just take down your sister. It could ruin 5 people in Washington. And maybe that should have scared me. Maybe 5 years ago it would have sent me running. But not now. Not after all the silence I'd swallowed, all the times I'd stepped aside for peace that never came. My hands didn't shake as I pushed the drive closer to her laptop, commitment replacing fear. Then let the light ruin them. The truth doesn't discriminate between the powerful and the powerless. She nodded once and stood, gathering her things with efficient movements. I'll need a few hours. Don't talk to anyone else. The warning was clear. By sunset, her team had cut together a tight, quiet video that Rebecca sent me for approval. No flashy graphics, no dramatic music, just facts, screenshots, audio laid bare. The voiceover wasn't an actor or Rebecca. It was Mom's voice, raw, slurred at moments from medication, but unmistakably lucid and desperate. The title appeared in simple text, signed while sedated, inside a $1 billion inheritance scandal. The simplicity made it more powerful. Rebecca clicked publish from her office downtown. And the internet did the rest, the truth spreading like wildfire. It started on niche forums, estate law threads, inheritance justice groups sharing and commenting. But by midnight, a dozen local journalists had picked it up, sensing the bigger story. By dawn, the such as Clause 17C was trending nationwide, climbing higher by the hour. They didn't say my name at first in the major reports protecting my privacy. They called me the younger daughter or the contested heir, but the voice in the audio wasn't mine or an actor's. It was hers. Mom's voice saying things like, "They made me sign it while I was medicated." I never wanted it to end this way. Her words finally heard by the world. I watched the shares rise from my living room floor, legs tucked under me, wrapped in the same cardigan I wore to her hospice bed. The week she passed, its soft fabric comforting against my skin. The truth was finally out, and it wasn't my word against Eleanor's. It was Mom's voice speaking from beyond, finally heard. A quiet knock broke the silence around 800 Hall. Startling me from my thoughts. My attorney, David, yes, the one I'd quietly retained 2 weeks ago when I first found the phone, stood outside with a thermos of coffee. And a calm smile that reassured me. "You ready?" he asked as I opened the door, his confidence contagious. "For what?" I asked, taking the offered coffee, its warmth seeping into my cold hands. "For the court to know your name," he said, his eyes serious but kind. "It's time to step out of the shadows." He handed me a printed copy of the petition we were filing, the legal language now making sense to my trained eye. An injunction to freeze all disbursements and a motion to reopen probate under California Code. His thumb tapped one line, drawing my attention. Plaintiff request review based on newly discovered evidence suggesting undue influence and forgery of capacity. The words made it real. "You're not asking for her money," he said, his voice gentle. "You're asking for your mother's real intentions to be honored. That's bigger than any inheritance." His understanding made my throat tight with emotion. I signed with steady hands, my signature joining my mother's across time. 2 hours later, Eleanor was on camera live, draped in navy Armani, makeup perfect for the cameras, eyes glistening just enough to suggest victimhood. "My sister, my half-sister, has always been troubled," she said, pausing dramatically so the cameras could catch her manufactured pain. I tried to include her. I tried to care for her after our mother passed, but this is a cruel smear campaign against me, against our family, against everything my mother built with her own hands. Each word was carefully crafted to paint me as unstable. I didn't watch it alone, couldn't trust myself not to throw something at the screen. Rebecca sat beside me on the couch, laptop open on her knees, live streaming every second, her presence grounding me. "She's good," Rebecca muttered, taking notes as Eleanor spoke. "She's practiced. But she's not prepared for the evidence we have." The confidence in her voice strengthened my resolve. When the feed cut to commercials, we just sat there in companionable silence. I sipped water, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Rebecca typed a quick update to her blog, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Then something unexpected happened. The phone buzzed. Not mine, not Rebecca's. The old one. Mom's. It lit up on the corner table as if summoned by the heat of the moment, its screen glowing blue. I walked over and picked it up with trembling fingers. No caller, no alert, just a new folder on the home screen that hadn't been there before. For her when the time comes. The timing seemed impossible yet perfect. I tapped it open, my pulse pounding in my ears. Inside was a single audio file, Delmore reading by counsel. Wave. It was her lawyer, Mom's original estate attorney, David's predecessor. His voice was dry, clipped, but unmistakable and official. This is a reading of the revised estate directive dated March 23rd, notarized and witnessed. Beneficiary instructions as follows. The legal language flowed clearly, leaving no room for misinterpretation. The document was real. The will was legal. And the voice named me first and clearly. No confusion, no grey space. Natalie Delmore, only daughter and primary inheritor. The words made me gasp. The silence that had followed me my entire life cracked slowly and completely, like ice breaking on a frozen lake, letting light through at last. I sat at the kitchen table that night, folders open, papers spread out like wings across the wooden surface. Rebecca leaned over them, shaking her head in disbelief at what we'd uncovered. "If you walk into that courtroom with this," she said, tapping a particularly damning document, "you won't just be a footnote anymore. You'll be the headline that changes everything." Her voice held both warning and admiration. I closed the folder, gathering the papers into a neat stack. "I never wanted to be famous," I said, the truth simple and clean. "Just seen." Just acknowledged as her daughter, too. The next morning, dressed in navy slacks and a cream blouse I'd worn to job interviews years ago, I straightened my shoulders and walked through the heavy doors of the Napa County Courthouse. My heart pounded, but my steps were steady. The receptionist didn't recognize me, her eyes passing over me without interest. That was fine. That would change soon enough. I placed the manila envelope on the counter with steady hands. "I'm here to submit a formal petition to amend Case 1832, Delmore probate," I said, my voice clear and strong. She blinked, looking up at me with sudden interest. "You're the younger daughter? The one from the news?" Recognition dawned in her eyes. "No," I said quietly but firmly, standing taller than I ever had. "I'm the only daughter." The declaration felt right, true in a way nothing else had. The courthouse doors didn't make a sound as they closed behind me, their weight substantial but no longer intimidating. Inside, it smelled faintly of paper and polished tile, the scent of authority and history. No crowds, no cameras yet, just the echo of my footsteps and the soft crinkle of the file in my hands as I walked toward my future. By the time I reached the probate clerk's desk, my palms had gone clammy with anticipation. I tightened my grip on the folder, drawing strength from what it contained. The folder wasn't heavy physically, but what was inside? It carried the weight of years I had spent invisible, watching from the sidelines of my own family. The clerk glanced up, recognition flickering in her eyes. "You're here about the Delmore estate case?" It wasn't a question. I nodded, my voice steady. "I'm here to submit a formal petition to amend the will on record. And this," I slid the document across the polished counter, "is the evidence that will change everything." The certainty in my voice surprised even me. She opened it without ceremony, flipping through the pages with professional detachment. A moment later, the judge's assistant emerged from a side door and called my name, making my heart leap. Inside the hearing room, I was asked to sit in a high-backed chair that felt too formal. No one else spoke for the first few moments, the silence heavy with anticipation. Then Judge Miriam, a lean woman in her 60s with tired eyes and a no-nonsense tone that reminded me of my mother, asked gently, "You're Natalie Delmore?" Her eyes were kind but penetrating. "Yes, Your Honor." My voice came out stronger than I expected. "You have audio evidence?" she asked, eyeing the phone in my hand. I nodded and handed over the phone, which now felt like a sacred object, a vessel of truth. It had carried pain and then proof. Now it was delivering justice, one file at a time. Judge Miriam pressed play, her expression impassive. The room filled with my mother's voice, clear despite her illness. I was coerced. My daughters must know the truth. My final will is in the vault. I never revoked it. The words hung in the air, impossible to ignore or dismiss. There was no mistaking her tone. Calm, tired, but lucid and determined. The silence that followed her voice was absolute, heavy with implication. Judge Miriam looked up, her eyes now sharp with purpose. "And this will, it's notarized?" Her voice had gained an edge. "Yes, Your Honor," I replied, meeting her gaze. "And witnessed?" she pressed. "The witness is willing to appear. Today, if necessary." The thought of Walter testifying made my heart race, but I knew he would keep his word. She nodded once, decisive. "Then I'm ordering a full review under California Probate Code." The stay-on disbursements remains effective immediately. Her gavel came down with a crack that seemed to seal my mother's final wish. My knees nearly buckled when I stood to leave, relief washing over me in waves. For the first time in my life, I had been heard. Really heard. Outside, I didn't go straight home, too wired with adrenaline to be confined. I sat in my car, engine off, staring at the courthouse steps where reporters would soon gather once word spread. The story broke before I could even check my phone. News alerts lit up the screen like sparks on dry grass, each one more urgent than the last. New evidence emerges in billion-dollar estate battle. Final will of Victoria Delmore may have been overlooked in inheritance scandal. Prominent senators implicated in estate manipulation case. By the time I got back to my apartment, Eleanor had pulled out of her planned media interview, a telling retreat. Her publicist issued a vague no comment and quit later that evening, not wanting to be associated with the growing scandal. I refused all interview requests, letting the evidence speak for itself. I wasn't interested in becoming a public figure or celebrity victim. I didn't need a spotlight. I'd lived too long in someone else's shadow to chase one now. Then came the message as twilight fell. Just 2 words appearing on my phone screen. Come alone. The brevity more threatening than any long explanation. There was no signature, but I knew who it was from, my body tensing as I read it. That evening I drove to the vineyard, the familiar road now feeling different. The vines were dormant, skeletal in the fading light. The air carried a chill that seeped through my jacket even though the sun hadn't quite set. I found her near the edge of the property where the land dipped and the view stretched for miles. A dramatic backdrop for our final confrontation. Eleanor stood with her arms crossed, her silhouette sharp against the darkening sky. She didn't smile, didn't pretend. Her eyes were cold but tired, the perfect mask finally slipping. So, she said, her voice carrying in the still air. The quiet girl finally screamed. The contempt in her voice was familiar, almost comforting in its predictability. I didn't scream, I said, my voice calm and clear. I just stopped whispering. There's a difference, she scoffed, the sound harsh in the quiet evening. You always had the softest voice, but now the world listens to you. The bitterness was unmistakable. I stepped closer, but not too close, keeping a safe distance between us. They're not listening to me. They're listening to her, to Mom. You silenced her. I just pressed play. The simple truth hung between us. That landed. Eleanor's jaw clenched visibly, a muscle twitching. Her fingers twitched slightly like she wanted to slap something or someone, but knew it wouldn't help now. Her control was slipping with each passing moment. I was supposed to be the one she trusted, she said, vulnerability briefly breaking through her armor. You were the one who had access. There's a difference, I replied, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. Trust is earned, not taken. We didn't fight. We didn't yell. We just stood there surrounded by vines planted by a woman neither of us fully understood until she was gone. Her presence somehow stronger now than when she lived. Eleanor looked away first, her profile sharp against the sunset. You think this changes anything between us? The question seemed genuine. No, I said thoughtfully. I think it reveals everything that was already there. The truth was simple and final. She didn't follow me when I left, remaining on the hillside like a statue as I walked away, my steps lighter than they had been in years. Back home, I placed the old flip phone in a small wooden box inlaid with mother of pearl. Nothing fancy, just something clean and simple that felt right. I set it on a shelf beside a photograph of Mom in her gardening hat, dirt on her cheek. Laughing in the sunlight, the woman she was before illness took her strength. The next morning, I walked 2 blocks to the newly painted building that once housed a rundown cafe. Now the windows bore the name, the Victoria Delmore Centre for Family Legal Aid, in elegant gold lettering. The sign caught the morning sun shining like a beacon. Inside, a small staff of 3 attorneys and 2 paralegals shuffled between desks, already busy despite the early hour. Colourful flyers hung on bulletin boards offering free legal consultations for families in dispute. A handwritten note in a simple frame sat on the front counter, catching the eye of everyone who entered. She never asked, she never took, but she never left. Mom's philosophy in 9 simple words. Rebecca met me in the hallway, her silver hair gleaming under the lights, as she handed me one of 2 mugs of tea she carried. No press, no cameras, just the quiet hum of a purpose finally set into motion. This was never about revenge or wealth, but about truth and helping others find their voice. I walked into the back room that would serve as my office, placed the box with the phone on a shelf above a row of law books dealing with family estates, and exhaled deeply, feeling truly at peace for the first time in years. She never asked, she never took, but she never left. The words had become my mantra, my mission. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the quiet one relegated to the sidelines. I felt seen. I felt heard. I felt present in my own story. And that was worth more than any inheritance.